Commander Vorthak adjusted his 3 eyes, focusing on the viewing screen with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for watching paint dry. Another human ship had wandered into Sector Omega-7, completely oblivious to the fact that this region belonged to the Ketharian Empire. The third most advanced civilization in the galaxy, thank you very much. Sir, his communications officer, Lieutenant Zex, chirped through his translator, the human vessel is requesting safe passage. They claim to be explorers. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. Explorers? These bipedal meat sacks could barely manage interstellar travel without their primitive fusion drives exploding every few parsecs. The audacity was almost amusing. Tell them, Vorthak drawled, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for particularly slow children, that they have exactly 30 standard minutes to turn around and flee back to whatever backwater planet they crawled out of. Otherwise, we'll demonstrate why the Ketharian fleet hasn't lost a battle in over 4 centuries. The human ship, a pathetically small vessel called the Aurora's Edge, didn't move. Not even a twitch of its primitive maneuvering thrusters. Sir? Lieutenant Zex's voice carried a note of confusion. They're laughing? Laughing? Vorthak's primary eye swiveled toward the communications console. At us? The transmission crackled to life, and a distinctly human voice filled the bridge. Female, by the sound of it, with an accent that suggested she'd spent considerable time in the Terran colonies. Ketharian vessel, the voice began, and Vorthak could practically hear the smile in her words. This is Captain Maya Torres of the Aurora's Edge. I appreciate the dramatic welcome, but I'm afraid we can't comply with your request. Vorthak's 3 hearts began beating in an increasingly agitated rhythm. The sheer nerve. And why, he managed through gritted mandibles, is that human? Well, Torres replied, her tone so casual she might have been discussing the weather. It's complicated. You see, we're not exactly here by choice. Our navigation computer decided to take an unscheduled vacation, and frankly, your sector is the only thing standing between us and a rather unpleasant encounter with that black hole about 6 light hours behind us. The tactical officer, Sub-Commander Ilith, turned toward Vorthak with all 4 of her arms gesturing frantically at her console. Sir, she's not lying. Long-range sensors confirm a gravitational anomaly consistent with a Class 7 singularity. They're caught in its outer influence field. Vorthak's confidence wavered for precisely 0.3 seconds before reasserting itself. So what if the humans were trapped? That was their problem, not his. Then you'll die with honor, he announced grandly, knowing that you perished in Ketharian space. Another laugh echoed through the comm system. Honor's nice and all, Commander Vorthak, but I've got a better idea. How about we make this interesting? Interesting? Vorthak's voice pitched higher than he would have liked. You're a single light cruiser facing a Ketharian battle group. Exactly what do you find interesting about imminent annihilation? Oh, I don't know, Torres mused, and Vorthak could swear he heard her drumming her fingers against something. Maybe the fact that you've got 17 ships, all armed with quantum disruptors, shield generators that could deflect a small moon, and enough firepower to glass a planet, and you're still talking instead of shooting. The bridge fell silent. Even the omnipresent hum of the life support system seemed to pause in anticipation. I beg your pardon. Vorthak's voice was dangerously quiet. Come on, Commander. If I were really that insignificant, you'd have vaporized me the moment I entered your precious sector. But here we are, having a lovely chat. Which means either you're the most talkative mass murderer in the galaxy, or something about my little ship has got you curious. Sub-Commander Ilitha's tentacles were practically vibrating with excitement as she studied her sensor readings. Sir, she whispered, the human vessel, it's not just damaged. The energy signature is completely unlike anything in our databases. The power core readings are impossible. Vorthak felt a chill run down his spine. In 4 centuries of military service, the word impossible had appeared in exactly 0 official reports. Elaborate, he growled. The reactor appears to be operating at 12% efficiency, yet it's generating enough power to maintain full shields and weapon systems. Either our sensors are malfunctioning, or... Ilatha's voice trailed off. Or what? Or they're running on technology we don't understand. Captain Torres' voice crackled through the comm again, interrupting Vorthak's rapidly spiraling thoughts. Having a nice little conference over there? I hate to interrupt, but I've got a proposition for you. Speak, Vorthak managed, his usual commanding tone reduced to something resembling a croak. Simple enough. Your people are apex predators, right? Top of the food chain, masters of the galaxy, all that good stuff? The Ketharian Empire has dominated this sector for over 2 millennia, Vorthak replied stiffly. Right, right. Very impressive. Here's the thing, though. Back on Earth, we had apex predators too. Lions, tigers, sharks, magnificent creatures, every one of them. But you know what happened to most of them? Vorthak found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. What? They ended up in zoos. The silence that followed was so complete that Vorthak could hear his own circulatory fluid pumping through his auditory chambers. Now, Torres continued, her voice taking on a distinctly cheerful quality that somehow made Vorthak's skin crawl, I'm not suggesting anything so undignified. But I am curious about something. You mentioned that the Ketharian fleet hasn't lost a battle in 4 centuries. That's quite a streak. It is a matter of historical record, Vorthak replied carefully. Absolutely. Very impressive record. Almost too good to be true, really. Which makes me wonder, when was the last time you actually fought someone who could fight back? Lieutenant Zexa's translator began emitting a high-pitched whine that suggested either technical malfunction or existential crisis. Possibly both. Our military superiority is beyond question, Vorthak stated, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Oh, I'm sure it is. Against the usual suspects, anyway. But here's the thing about humans, Commander Vorthak. We've got this terrible habit of being unpredictable. As if summoned by her words, the Aurora's edge suddenly lurched into motion. Not the smooth, calculated maneuvers of an advanced spacecraft, but something far more organic. The small vessel twisted and spun through space with an almost animal-like grace, positioning itself directly between the Ketharian battle group and the distant black hole. What is she doing? Ilatha whispered, her tentacles now rigid with what Vorthak recognized as primal fear. Something very stupid, Vorthak replied, or very clever. You know what the funny thing about gravity wells is? Torres' voice had taken on an almost conversational tone. They don't discriminate. Doesn't matter if you're a primitive human vessel or an advanced Ketharian dreadnought. Physics applies to everyone equally. Vorthak's eyes widened as the implications hit him. The human ship wasn't just positioned between them and the black hole. It was positioned perfectly to use the gravitational field as a slingshot, turning the very force that trapped them into a weapon. She's insane, he breathed. Sir, Ilatha's voice was climbing toward hysteria. If she accelerates toward the singularity and uses our formation as a gravitational anchor point, she'll tear through our ships like they're made of tissue paper, Vorthak finished. Torres' laughter echoed through the comm system one final time. Now that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Care to find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The Aurora's edge began to accelerate toward the black hole, and Vorthak realized with growing horror that the human captain had just turned the laws of physics into her personal artillery system. This was going to be a very long day. Commander Vorthak watched in horrified fascination as the Aurora's edge continued its suicidal dive toward the black hole. The human vessel's trajectory was so perfectly calculated that it would pass within mere kilometers of his flagship, the Decimator, before slingshotting around the gravitational field. Sir, Lieutenant Zexa's voice had reached a pitch that threatened to shatter the bridge's viewing screens. Should we move? Move where? Vorthak snapped. If we break formation now, we'll lose our gravitational cohesion. The singularity will pull us apart like scattered debris. Sub-Commander Ilith was practically hyperventilating through her breathing apparatus. But if we stay in position, that human lunatic will use us as a ricochet point. The kinetic energy transfer alone will what? Vorthak demanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. We'll turn our own mass against us, sir. She's essentially using 17 Ketharian warships as the universe's most expensive pinball machine. Captain Torres' voice crackled through the comm system again, now noticeably distorted by the increasing gravitational field. Having second thoughts, Commander? I'd hate for you to miss the show. Vorthak's mandibles clicked rapidly in what his species considered nervous laughter. You realize, human, that your plan requires you to survive passing within the event horizon's influence zone? The tidal forces alone will tear your primitive vessel apart. Oh, that's adorable, Torres replied, and Vorthak could practically hear her grinning. You think this is my first rodeo with a black hole? Your first what? Never mind. Listen, Commander, I've got about 90 seconds before I reach the point of no return, so let me ask you something. What do you know about human history? Vorthak found himself answering despite the surreal circumstances. Primitive species. Recent spaceflight capability. Approximately 12 billion individuals spread across 47 colony worlds. Technologically inferior but persistent. Persistent, Torres mused. I like that. Very diplomatic. But you missed the important part. Which is? We're survivors, Vorthak. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest. But we're the ones who are still standing when everything else falls down. The Aurora's edge was now moving at 17% of light speed, and the gravitational distortion was creating a visible wake in spacetime itself. Vorthak's tactical display showed the human vessel's approach vector with clinical precision, counting down the seconds until impact. 45 seconds to intercept, Ilith reported, her voice hollow with resignation. You want to know why we call ourselves the apex predators of this galaxy? Torres continued, seemingly oblivious to her impending doom. Because we've never encountered anything that could challenge us. Every species we've met has either submitted, allied with us, or been removed. Vorthak's primary eye focused on the tactical display. Something was wrong. The human ship's energy signature was changing, growing stronger rather than weaker as it approached the black hole's influence. That's impossible, he whispered. What's impossible, sir? Zex asked. The human vessel. It's not being torn apart by the tidal forces. It's absorbing them. Torres' laughter echoed through the bridge, now carrying an edge that made Vorthak's secondary heart skip a beat. You really don't know, do you? About what happened to the Nexari Empire? Or the Vulcan Confederacy? Or the dozen other civilizations that used to control this region of space? Those empires fell due to internal conflicts and resource depletion, Vorthak stated automatically, reciting the accepted historical record. Is that what they told you? Torres' voice was now laced with something that might have been pity. Oh, Vorthak. You sweet, naive apex predator. They didn't fall. They were tamed. 20 seconds to intercept, Ilith announced, though her words were barely audible above the increasingly violent gravitational fluctuations affecting the ship's systems. You see, Torres continued, her voice now coming through crystal clear despite the impossible physics surrounding her vessel, humans have this funny relationship with apex predators. We start out as prey, running and hiding and generally trying not to get eaten. But then something interesting happens. The Aurora's edge was now so close to the decimator that Vorthak could see individual hull plates on the human vessel. Remarkably, they appeared to be intact, showing no signs of the catastrophic stress that should have reduced the ship to component atoms by now. We learn, Torres said simply, and then everything happened at once, the Aurora's edge didn't collide with the decimator. Instead, it passed through the space occupied by Vorthak's flagship, phasing through solid matter as if the massive Ketharian dreadnought were nothing more than a holographic projection. What in the name of the Seven Suns? Vorthak gasped, his 3 eyes wide with shock. Dimensional displacement technology, Torres explained cheerfully, her ship now positioned directly behind the Ketharian battle group and accelerating away from the black hole with impossible velocity. We learned it from the Nexari. Right before we convinced them that cooperation was more profitable than conquest. Sub-Commander Ilatha's tentacles were now writhing in what Vorthak recognized as the early stages of psychological breakdown. Sir, our weapon systems they're not responding to commands. Of course they're not, Torres replied, apparently monitoring their internal communications. Quantum entanglement viruses. We picked that trick up from the Vulgans. Fascinating species, by the way. They're running a lovely agricultural collective in the Andromeda sector now. Vorthak's voice came out as little more than a croak. What do you want? Want? Oh, Commander, you're thinking about this all wrong. This isn't about what I want. This is about what you need. The Aurora's edge had now completed its impossible maneuver, positioning itself at the exact center of the Ketharian formation. 17 of the most advanced warships in known space, and somehow a single human vessel had rendered them all completely helpless. And what, Vorthak managed, do we need? A new perspective, Torres replied. You see, the thing about being an apex predator is that it's a temporary condition. Evolution doesn't stop just because you're at the top of the food chain. Something bigger, faster, or smarter always comes along eventually. Are you threatening us? Vorthak demanded, though the question sounded pathetic even to his own ears. Threatening? Oh no, Commander. I'm offering you a choice. The same choice we offered the Nexari, the Vulgans, and all the others. Which is? Join us, Torres said simply. Become part of something larger than any single empire or species. We call it the Terran Commonwealth, though that's really just a formality. What it actually is, well, it's a family. Vorthak's translator struggled with the concept, producing a sound that roughly approximated confused static. I don't understand, he admitted. Of course you don't. You're thinking like a predator, not a human. Predators compete, conquer, dominate. Humans, we adapt. We learn. We grow. And when we encounter something that could challenge us, we don't destroy it. We make it part of us. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems that were, Vorthak realized with growing unease, now operating under human control. Your technology, he said slowly. The dimensional phasing, the quantum viruses, the gravitational manipulation, none of it is originally human, is it? Very good. Torres sounded genuinely pleased. You're starting to understand. Every species we've encountered has contributed something unique to the Commonwealth. The Nexari gave us dimensional technology. The Vulgans provided quantum computing. The Zalari contributed biological enhancement techniques. The list goes on. And what happens to those who refuse to join? Torres' voice grew thoughtful. You know, that's an interesting question. The thing is, nobody's actually refused yet. Once they understand what we're really offering, the choice becomes pretty obvious. And what are you offering? Immortality, Torres replied casually. Not in the biological sense, though we've got that covered too. I'm talking about something more fundamental. The chance to become part of something that will outlast the heat death of the universe itself. Vorthak felt his worldview crumbling around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. Everything the Ketharian Empire had believed about human weakness, about their own superiority, about the natural order of the galaxy, all of it was based on a fundamental misunderstanding: humans weren't a primitive species struggling to survive in a hostile universe. They were the universe's most successful parasites, absorbing and integrating every form of life they encountered until the distinction between conqueror and conquered became meaningless. So, Torres continued, her tone now almost gentle, what do you say, Commander Vorthak? Ready to evolve? Vorthak looked around his bridge at his officers, seeing his own shock and confusion reflected in their faces. Lieutenant Zex was staring at his console as if it had personally betrayed him. Sub-Commander Ilith had curled into a defensive posture that suggested she was reconsidering her entire understanding of biology. If we agree, Vorthak said slowly, what happens to the Ketharian Empire? It becomes the Ketharian Commonwealth sector, Torres replied promptly. You keep your territory, your culture, your identity. You just get access to technologies and resources that will make your current capabilities look like stone tools. And if we refuse? Torres was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of genuine sadness. Then you'll join the others in the archives. Preserved perfectly, but no longer growing. No longer changing. No longer alive in any way that matters. The implication hung in the air like a death sentence. Vorthak realized that this wasn't really a choice at all. It was an inevitability dressed up in the illusion of free will. The galaxy watched her die, he said quietly, finally understanding. I'm sorry. It's something my grandfather used to say. About evolution, about change. The galaxy watched her die, and then she became something else entirely. Torres' laughter was warm, almost affectionate. Your grandfather sounds like a wise individual. I think he would have understood what we're really doing here. Commander Vorthak looked out at the stars, seeing them not as territories to be conquered but as potential homes for something vast and strange and wonderful. Something that had once been human but was now so much more. Welcome to the Commonwealth, he said, and meant it. The aurora of a new age began to dance across the hull of every ship in the sector, and the Ketharian Empire took its first steps toward becoming something magnificent.